software. Right, and if you're doing that, are you using, say, Ant to manage the integration between the different components? Maven? Something else? By hand? Right, okay. So what we're going to be talking about today is how you can use Gradle to really help orchestrate this process of managing a Grails software asset as just one piece of a software stack. That's really why you want to look into this space. And we're going to be talking about a Gradle plugin that is available to use at the moment. It's not quite in final release. It's been at the current development version for about 2 years, but we're getting there. So what I would like to get out of today is to show you some of the possibilities with this plugin as it stands today, point out some of the things that still need to be addressed, and hopefully give you some ideas and insight, and you can go and use it on your projects. So we're hoping that for Grails 2.3, this is a very powerful and robust solution for doing this kind of application building when you have complex building scenarios that just a standalone Grails app doesn't really cut it for. So can I see a quick show of hands, who here is using Gradle in some aspect? Okay, cool. So I'm going to not really be doing a Gradle 101 today. I'll explain the things as I'm going through them. But yeah, this is more about the specific interaction between Grails and Gradle for this. Okay, so I'm going to start. I have a Gradle build file here. And so this is all I have at this point in time. I have a build.gradle and I'm just pulling in the Grails Gradle plugin. This is the kind of the key piece that is going to drive all the integration that we're going to use today. It's available part of the Grails dependency repository. It's open source. The code is on GitHub. You can find it under the Grails user. So this is what I need in order to get a jar into my build that I can use from Gradle. So this is going to provide a plugin, the Grails plugin. And there's a few things I need to do before I can really get started. So one of the things I need to do is specify a project version. So I'm going to start at 1.0, pretty ambitious. I need to set a project group. So let's say project group is going to be greatconf. And I also need to say what's the version of Grails this project is going to build with. So I'm going to build with 2.2.3. which is the latest stable release, unless I've missed some news. That's right, yeah? Cool. All right, so given this, that's all I need to actually bootstrap a new Grails application. So go back to my command line. If I run Gradle space init, doesn't work. Missing one final thing. I need to specify where am I going to get my actual dependencies from. Repositories, Maven, so I can just copy this line. So the immediate thing that jumps out here is, well, why do I have this twice? There's a separation in Gradle between the build dependencies and the build class path and the application runtime. So in this case here, what we're doing is we're managing what dependencies do we need at build time in order to run the build. Here, this repositories block here is talking about our application dependencies, and we need all the Grails jars, all the Spring jars, all that stuff in order to run an application. So now we're specifying we want to get our runtime dependencies from this repository. Now I should be able to go and bootstrap the application. So do it on the internet. I asked the question and you said yes. That's looking better. Okay, so I've run this before. There was a whole bunch of dependencies that come down with Grails if you've ever tried to bootstrap this process. So I had these on my machine, but what it actually has gone and done has gone and grabbed all the jars that make up the Grails distribution and assembled them into a class path. Now I've got a nasty looking stack trace here, but if I just scroll to the top. So what happened is, this is the same thing as running Grails space create app. I've bootstrapped a new Grails application. I can see in my project here, I've got a Grails app directory. I've got all the stuff that you get when you create a new Grails application with Grails itself. Now this stack trace, there are some thorny edges still in this plugin. Some of the Grails commands still don't work properly if you don't have a Grails installation, because I'm not using a sort of Grails home or any previously installed version of Grails to run this process. Gradle has managed to go and get all those jars and run them. So there are a few scripts still that are part of Grails that don't quite work in this environment, but what's failed here is actually generating the Eclipse metadata. I don't need that today, so while this exception looks very scary, it's actually benign. So I now have a valid Grails application, and I can try and, if I say wrong, with this plugin, if I can run any Grails command that I would via the Grails command line binary. I just specify Gradle, Grails, space, whatever the command is to run. So run app. This is effectively delegating through to Grails and running run app. Now what's happening here is that usually when you start Grails, using its dependency management, it's going to go out and talk to the Maven repositories and get the application dependencies and those kinds of things. When you're using Grails through Gradle in this way, that becomes Gradle's responsibility. So that whole dependency management section that's built into Grails is effectively switched off. It's now Gradle that's responsible for this. That won't be the last time I mix the two names up. So it's complaining now that it doesn't have a Tomcat plugin at all, because Grails needs some kind of servlet or container plugin in order to run. So we don't have one. So what we do is we just add it as a normal Gradle dependency. So I have a compile dependency of org.grails Tomcat, plugin Tomcat. And I want to use the same version of Grails as the rest of the dependencies, so I can just use that variable there, which is going to be what I set now. So even Grails plugins can be managed just like normal Gradle dependencies. Or can they? Oh, I didn't save the file. I'm working in IDEA too much with autosave. Typo there. So here goes the applications up and running. So effectively all that's happened is that that whole dependency management aspect has been cut out, taken to Gradle. Gradle manages all that stuff, assembles what the class path is eventually going to look like, then bootstraps Grails. So all of the Grails scripts, the create app scripts, and all the whole build system is still there. It's just the class path management that we've essentially kicked out to Gradle. And one of the things you'll see is that it's Gradle is a specialized build tool, and we've put a lot of work into optimizing dependency resolution. You'll notice it's a lot faster than Grails is for resolving so many dependencies. So it's one of the benefits is you get a quicker startup time because Gradle will actually manage that process faster. So now I have a running application. 8080. Don't believe so. Oh, I should do this. So there's my running Grails app. So the way that this command here is working is that Gradle has the ability to create tasks on demand. You can specify a kind of naming pattern for a task, and based on the name that you actually give, the rules will kick in and create tasks to do work on the fly. I haven't had to specify as part of my Gradle build at all that there is a Grails run app task. It's using this naming pattern, and that gives me full access to all of the Grails scripts from my Gradle build. I don't need to add specific wiring for each script that I want to invoke. So another thing you might want to do is say, okay, well now we actually want to run with a different port. This is quite common to run Grails, run app, and then specify the port that we want to run with. Well, we can do that as well. The syntax is a little different because we have to specify that we want to send these through to Grails. Let's go with 8081. I think I got that right. Nope. Never mind that, we'll see that again later. Okay, so now if I want to, typically what you would do to manage dependencies in a Gradle project is come in here to the build config file and add some stuff into here. So is there anybody using Grails that isn't using this dependency management mechanism, who is checking jars into the lib directory, doing that kind of thing? Oh, cool, it's changed a lot since last year. Right, so this whole section of our build config file we can just remove. Dependency resolution is not something that our Grails application is doing at all. It's gone from there. So we want to do something like, I'm just going to add a dependency that I want to use in my application. That's going to be at I want to use commons lang. So I specify a compile dependency on commons lang 3.1 here. Run my application again. If I'm changing the class path, I do need to stop and start the application. So up it goes. Actually, before I do that, I want to do something else. My application actually doesn't have anything yet. I don't have any controllers, don't have anything actually useful. So I want to use the Gradle Grails create controller command, which is going to call Grails create controller. The output is a little funny. When I type here, I don't actually get to see anything. There's a Grails and Gradle are both fighting over control of the console here, so it's one of the things that's a little bit different. But I could type in test there, and it's created a test controller.groovy for me, just like the create controller command. Now if I do Gradle Grails run app, there's my controller. And I haven't actually specified that it does anything yet, so let's go into here. And the index, let's just render a string. So in this mode, when you're using Gradle to run your Grails applications, reloading is supported in the exact same way it is for a normal Grails application. So that all still works. I don't have to stop and start, which is quite nice. So now I want to use the dependency that I added back in my Gradle script. So one of the things that I have is a class from commons lang, which just gives me a random string of however many characters I want. So we're just showing that how we can use the dependencies that we added. And I get a very random string. I don't know why it prefers that character set, but anyway. So basically it's exactly the same process as what you would follow adding things to build config, except they go into the Gradle build script. And that means why you would do this is that Gradle is fundamentally a more capable dependency management system than what Grails exposes through Ivy. There are more options for controlling nasty dependency graphs and kicking things out and dealing with exclusions. And I'm sure if you've ever done a reasonable sized Grails app, you've had issues with dependencies sneaking in and not being able to control really what ends up in your class path. So one of the things that Gradle really tries to specialize in is giving you absolute control over what dependencies you end up using. There are many, many features that enable you to really take control of this. So that's one of the compelling reasons why you might go for this approach. So now we have that. Next thing I want to do is just running tests. How does running tests work? Well, I have a test here somewhere. Source test units. Grails was nice enough to create one for me. So this is just one of the tests that it created for us. I can run tests just like I would if I was using plain Gradle. Just need to add a prefix, so Gradle Grails test app. It all works exactly the same way. You'll notice the output is not quite as nice as well as it is when you're running Grails by itself. Again, it's a console fighting. That's something we can work on improving. So running tests is exactly the same. But if I want to, it's quite common in, before we do anything else, let's add an integration test. Simple. It should be called test nothing. So we now have an integration test. So running Grails test app runs all your test units in the integration test. It's quite common to say that we'll actually just want to run the unit tests rather than the integration test. That's what I'm doing. So I saw one integration test, one unit test up here. So I can do Grails args units, wrong way around. So this is how I can specify on the normal Grails command line. I would say Grails test app space unit colon to say just run the unit test. If I run this, I just get my unit test, no integration tests. That's a bit of a handful. I don't want to, every time I have to run my unit tests, type all this on the command line. So what we can do is we can alias commands inside the build. So I want to say, I want to create a task called unit tests, and it's going to be a Grails task. So there is a custom Gradle task type for this. I just need to grab the import. We need to import that class into the build script because it's coming from the plugin, not from core Gradle itself. And in here I can specify, well, what's the actual Grails command that I want to run, and what are the args that I want to pass as well. And it's unit colon. So now I can just do Gradle unit test. One of the things Gradle, like Grails, gives you a way to use a shorthand on the command line to specify what you want. So now I have a native Gradle task that I've created in my build with a name that I want that aliases a certain invocation of Grails. So you could do this for any particular command that you find yourself running over and over again. Just simply create a task in your Gradle build, call it what you like, and specify what the actual definition is. So we could go for integ test. And so there I can execute just the particular integration tests. So it doesn't change too much about the way you really work with the Grails application. It's really just about managing the dependencies, and you also get this extra level of flexibility that you can create aliased commands like this. So what about IDE support? Well, we can use before I go there. So one of the other things that Gradle can do for you is it gives you some pretty flexible options around how you publish what you're building. So Grails can do this as well, but if sometimes you need to do some heavier modifications, and it's one of the things that Gradle is good at. So what we want to do is publish the WAR file that our Grails app produces to our Nexus or our Artifactory, or something like that. So we need to do a little bit of work here that I'm going to be publishing to a Maven repository. So I need the Maven Gradle plugin, which gives me that capability. I want to create a task called WAR that's going to build my WAR file. I don't need any arguments. Let's check that that works. So now I've got a task that I can use to build my WAR file. I need to, in order to have Gradle publish this for us, we need to basically bring that WAR file into the Gradle world, into the Gradle domain model. So we do that by applying, let's apply a plugin that is actually used in every Gradle build, whether you, if you're using the Java plugin or the Groovy plugin or something like that, but you may not realize it. There is a base plugin which provides some very basic functionality, and some of that we need here to do the publishing. So we have a WAR file, an artifact that's being produced by this task. We need to model that in Gradle, and then Gradle can deal with the uploading of that for us. So the way that we do that is we have this artifacts DSL. We want to put the artifact onto the archives configuration. So in Gradle you have these named buckets of dependencies and publications. So for example, a named bucket of dependencies, we have compile here. There are others, runtime, test. For a Grails application there's even more. And it also serves to contain things that are outgoing as well, publications. So what we're trying to do here is add an artifact to the archives configuration. So we do this by specifying that, why don't I have a version number? I'll put version number in there. So when my WAR file gets created, this is where Grails is going to put it. So I'm going to say that there is a new artifact that is part of the archives configuration. This is a DSL in here. And that is actually built by the WAR task. So it's a file, that's where it's going to be, and when I need that, that's where it's actually, that's the task that can produce that for us. So that gives us, we can use some other Gradle machinery now to actually build this and hook it into our build lifecycle as well. One of the things that the base plugin added was another task rule to say that we can build any container of things. So we had our archives container, which we put our WAR file into. We also specified how that WAR file gets built. So that's another way that we can build it now. So now we have it as part of that configuration. We might want to say, okay, well, we've got some other Maven-based tooling that we need to integrate with. So we want to be able to install this into Maven local as well. Now, if you're used to using the Gradle Java plugin, you kind of get this for free. But the Gradle Grails plugin is not the Gradle Java plugin. So we need to do some of the things that that plugin does for us. So we need to create a new task called install. It's going to be an upload task. We're uploading to the Maven local repository. The container of things that it's actually going to upload are all of the archives. So there's nothing special about the archives configuration. It's just the conventional name for the default bucket of things that we can publish. Unlike Maven, from a Gradle build, I can publish any number of things easily. It's a more open model. So I'm saying that install task is going to upload all of our archives, and we're going to upload it to, in this case. So configurations are part of the core Gradle model. So there are a few things that are just fundamental to Gradle's domain model. And this really is just about the file system, the basic file system, and dependency management. So configurations are a concept in dependency management of a container or bucket call a named container of dependencies or outgoing publications. So in this case, these are actually the same things here. I'm specifying that I have some compile dependencies here. We're putting dependencies onto the compile configuration. In this case, we're on the other end, we're going out now. And instead of calling them dependencies, Gradle calls them artifacts. So we're now specifying these are some of the things we're producing. Typically, when you're using the built-in Gradle plugins, you don't have to deal with this. If you stick to the default, it takes care of wiring all this up for you. But we're off the beaten path a little bit because we're integrating with Grails. So we need to specify where we're actually going to install to. So the Maven plugin gives us a kind of DSL we can use in here to specify that when we run the install task, we want to upload all of the archives to the Maven local repository. It's effectively what that's saying. So now if I run Gradle install, goes and builds my WAR file, and has actually published that to GrateConf, I think. There's my WAR file that was built, published in Maven local. So that's publishing in Maven local is only so interesting. What we really want to do is publish to our Nexus or something like this. So the base plugin has given us a task that we can use already to do this called upload archives. All we need to specify is actually where do we want to publish that to. So instead of using a Maven installer now, I use a Maven deployer, and I'm just going to publish to the file system, but if it was HTTP, I would just have a HTTP URL in here. Publish to my local build directory under repository. So just conceptually swap the file out for HTTP here, and then you'd be uploading to Nexus or Artifactory, which should be doing. So now we're on Gradle, upload archives. Runs my build process, builds the WAR, and has actually done the upload for me. And that will do POM generation and all that kind of stuff as well. If we have a look, we get a very simple POM. So build.repo is where I uploaded to. POM. So I get a very simple POM file. I didn't need any instructions in there on how to build it, but if I wanted to add dependencies and things to that, I could. Gradle has a mechanism for customizing the output POM. So I can do that. So what if I wanted to use some other kinds of Gradle plugins? So I wanted to say try and integrate the CodeNarc plugin that does static code analysis for Groovy code. I can do that with a little bit of work. If I apply the CodeNarc plugin, and I'm going to need to create a task called CodeNarc. Type CodeNarc. I need to specify two things. Where is the source that you want me to inspect? So we can say, well, we actually want the files under Grails app, and it's only really worth looking at the Groovy code. Because under Grails app, there's a whole bunch of properties files and things like that, and CodeNarc doesn't deal very well with them. So there's my source, and then I can also specify that the config file, I have one I prepared earlier. So I've got a CodeNarc rule file here, which just gives me some very basic rules that I want to use to perform static analysis. Is anybody using CodeNarc in their projects? Oh, cool. So I'm going to say my config file is at file codenarc.xml. So now I have a CodeNarc task I can use. Gradle CodeNarc. Runs that. And Here's my wonderful CodeNarc report. So in this particular case though, you'd probably be better off using the Grails CodeNarc plugin because it already has a plugin to do this and it's more tightly integrated. But you could potentially use any Gradle plugin in this manner, which is get on the point of it. So you do have to do a little bit of wiring yourself. If I was trying to use the CodeNarc plugin with the standard Gradle Groovy plugin, all of this config would be taken care of for me. It's kind of the default behavior out of the box. But we have to do a little bit of wiring ourselves. Yeah? Don't quite understand the question, sorry.
I don't understand when you upload archives,
Mm-hmm.
you know that you have to upload a specified block.
Yes.
I don't see the dependency.
Mm-hmm. So this is working because the name of this task implies which configuration is it going to upload. So it's called upload archives, and it was automatically created the minute we created a configuration called archives. So, and part of that configuration called archives, we added an artifact, which is our WAR file, which the version number is wrong for. And we also specify that this file gets built by this particular Gradle task. Yeah. So therefore, when I want to use that artifact, Gradle can work out, before I can use it, I need to run this work. So this is the Gradle input-output mechanism at work. So next thing I want to take a look at is IDE support. What does it mean if you're going to be using this kind of mode? I'm going to use IDEA, and so I need to add the Gradle IDEA plugin. If I run that, that's going to generate IDEA metadata that I can use to then import this project. So if I run, to open it up, don't update IDEA before a presentation. Don't know what it's doing. Feels like I'm in Eclipse. No offense to the Eclipse users out there. I just seem to have really bad luck with it. It's just me, right? I literally, at 10 minutes before the presentation started, uploaded to the new version. It came out a few minutes ago. Wasn't that a good idea?
It worked on your session yesterday.
Yeah, I shouldn't have upgraded. And now it has completely killed my machine. You don't say. Let's give it one more go. Grails app. Yep. Okay, we're away. So using the idea import, I actually do get all of the dependency information in idea. So the Gradle idea integration has generated the appropriate idea metadata, so idea knows about what's going on. So these are all just the Grails dependencies. I should see somewhere here my custom commons lang something or other. We'll prove it's there another way. One thing that the plugin is not currently doing is correctly marking the source roots. This is something that it will do in the future, but for now I have to come in and say, well, actually, this is where the source is. So now if I come into here, I have my code, and it does all the usual idea Grails integration stuff. It understands the DSL and has all this really smart IntelliSense, understanding all the magic that Grails adds to your application. And I click through, I get the same kind of things that I usually get with Gradle in idea. It downloads the source dependencies, configures the project to use them, that kind of thing. So that works. I can also run my unit tests. I mark the directory as a test source root. Come into here. So as far as IntelliJ is concerned, this is a normal Grails application. There is one caveat though in that the normal Grails application for integration for IDEA can usually deal with running your integration tests. In this mode, that's not possible, because what's going to happen if it tries to do that, it's going to try and start Grails from its command line through its interface. And at this point, when you're working in this mode, the only way to start this application successfully is via Gradle, because it has to assemble all the dependencies and get the class path together to feed Grails. So with this application now, I can't just run it with Grails space run app. I'll get all kinds of compile errors because the dependencies won't be there on its class path. So once you go down this road, this is how you have to do it. So, okay, well, so far we've kind of seen that, well, it's not really that useful. Why would you do this? If you just have a single project and everything is self-contained, it's probably a path of less resistance to just use Grails dependency management. It's a little bit slow, it's a little bit flaky. In the current version, the latest version is going to be better. But so it's not that compelling. It really becomes interesting when you get into the multi-project scenarios. When you have it as one source tree, you have a lot of, say, just simple jar projects, and then as one aspect you want to build your Grails app. So what does that look like? So let's go and create a multi-project build. Okay. So 5 passed, it finishes. So I have a multi-project build here. So I have a library project that I'm going to spec out and an app project. So the app is going to be our Grails app. So let me just remove that. I'm going to copy this guy to here. So I've now pulled that guy in. I'm just going to update this. That can all stay the same. Now I want to, in my library project, create a new Java project. I'm just going to build a simple jar here. I'm using the very latest version of Gradle, and one of the features that is kind of new is that I can, just have to pass -u for a second. So I can bootstrap a new Gradle project. The type is Java library. Much similar to Maven archetypes, and I showed this yesterday if you were in my Gradle workshop, that this gives you a skeletal Java project ready to go. So I've got my Java plugin applied here, got a whole bunch of comments, things in here, and it's also pre-provisioned the Gradle wrapper, which I don't have time to go into. I don't need it in this case. I don't need the settings file. What I do want to do is move my dependency from being here over to this project over here. going to, now in multi-project build, I want to edit this in IDEA. I already have the IDEA plugin applied to this. Let's temp fate one more time. Yeah. So over here in my plain Java project, which is what library is, let's we'll use this. org.apache commons lang 3. Let's make it 20. So I'm moving my implementation over to my plain Java project. Immediately not doing anything too interesting. Static public string random. What's it complaining about? So here's my Java project. Back over in my build.gradle for my application, I can now use a Gradle project dependency to say that I actually want to build against this other module. So from here, let's go back over to my controller. Instead of using this guy directly, I want to use my library class, I believe it's called. Going to need to move this into a package. So from my Grails app, I'm using a class from my other project. And if I now go and run Gradle, then I need to say the application project as part of my build, Grails run app. See that before it started, the Grails application went and built my other Java library. So I don't have to go through the process of going over to one build system, build the jar file, put it somewhere where Grails can find it. It's all integrated into one fluid build. It's part of the reason to use this kind of situation. So a little bit of time. Okay. So yeah, so that's all I have to show today. Hopefully if you have this kind of requirement that you are building Grails applications as part of a bigger stack, and you're interested in Gradle, definitely check this out. You can have a look at its home on GitHub. Check it out, try it out. I'm working on some documentation for this. There is a little bit here. But give it a go. And if you have issues or problems with it or questions, just raise it through the GitHub interface. Any questions at this point? Yes?
When you replace the Grails dependencies,
yep.
the plugins, how do I easily find the whole path, like the organization?
Okay, so if you were to yeah, so here I have the Tomcat plugin. So if you were trying to use this in Grails, it would look like this, right? Just in the Grails plugin syntax, this is what you can use. And if you're using it in Gradle, you just have to prefix it with org.grails. So you can take the existing plugin notation, you just have to put org.grails in front of that leading colon. All of the same plugins that you can use in a normal Gradle, normal Grails build, you can use this way as well. Yeah?
How does this relate with the efforts for Grails 3 that you have native Gradle? Will this converge or is it a separate approach?
It's a very separate approach. At the moment, the integration is much more artificial, and so that we're just doing class path management and then kicking off to Grails' own build system. With Grails 3, there won't be that separation. It will all be Gradle just kicking off the Grails runtime. So this will be a lot tighter, the integration will be a lot tighter, everything will work, it'll be much nicer, effectively. So this is a separate bit of code. Some of the stuff out of this will end up being part of the Grails 3 build initiative, but fundamentally it's a different approach because Grails still has to have a lot of build time control at the moment. It's just about dependency management.
Along the same lines, are the changes to the dependency resolution in Grails 2.3 going to cause any problems with this approach?
No, because it's still just off. It just doesn't play. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.